Hello, my name is Eden, and for this video, I will be giving you a book review about Arthur, the dog who crossed the jungle to find a home. So, this book was made by the author, Mikael Lindnord, and it talks about how he met Arthur and how it changed his whole perspective about dogs. So behind the book, we will see there's a quote here that tells us that I never set out to have a dog, but I feel there is something of Arthur inside me. Meeting Arthur and bringing him home is the single best thing I have ever done, which means that Mikael had clearly been affected by Arthur's state since he found him in the jungle. I also want to mention to my friend Drix Bagapor for giving me this book so that I can perform a book review on it. So thanks so much and shout out to you too. So this book has 15 chapters in it, and there's also an epilogue about Arthur, and they also formed a foundation with his name on it. So the quote here in chapter 1, as you can see, I'll show you. There is a small quote here. So it reads, "People who do adventure racing are not normal." Chapter 1 is where Mikael Lindnord was a young boy, and he wanted to be the best hockey player in Sweden. Sadly, even through the training, the harsh training he endured day and night, he couldn't join the team because his coach didn't pick him. But he never quit. And his father was a military soldier and worked for the United Nations. Since he was a kid back then, he couldn't understand what was his job. So, now, after a year, it reads here, "Nowadays, I'm glad I had that year abroad and in such frighteningly unfamiliar places. Like a lot of not always pleasant experiences that one has in life, I can look back on it and realize that I actually learned things that make me understand the world a little bit better." So reading here, he had to go to Pakistani. That was the country he was in, Pakistan. And he learned from a school there in Damascus, where, from his experience, the teachers were very brutal and very strict. Although even if he had strict teachers, he endured the pain and the abuse that they gave him. It was a very hard time for him. Not only was he being beaten, but he was also desperately homesick for Sweden because he wanted to go back home. After Pakistan, they moved to Egypt or Cairo. And that is where he lived for a short time, interacting with Egyptian children. And he had such a hard time learning in another language, such as Egyptian language. So after that, they went back to Sweden. And that's where his life started to change. In the age of 17 years old. When he was 17 years old, he was in school. And he met a girl called Helena. And Helena was this fiancé of his, soon to be fiancé of his. But for now, we will address her as his girlfriend. So Helena was Mikael's girlfriend, and they had a very fun time. And then when they grew up, for like about 20 years old, let's go to where Helena started to support Mikael from joining the adventure racing called the World Adventure Racing Championship. So in this adventure racing, he was very curious about it since he saw what the adventure racing is, since he had a sense of adventure and he wanted to test his body of his physical and mental capabilities. And so after that, he joined the race in Ecuador. So they moved to Ecuador for a short time in order to join the race. So in that race, he and his team, or his so-called group of friends, also joined. The members were Christer Goransson, a photographer and a good friend, Staffan Bjorklund, Simon Yemi, and Karen Lundgren. So these were the members of Team Peak Performance. So they started off very slow, but again, they had endured these past months, these past years, with painful and tormenting tests of military, and that's why they had bounced back easily and had won the championship. Then, a few years later, they joined another World Adventure Racing. This is where they met Arthur. In the middle of their destination, they met a dog, a golden-haired furry dog. His name was Arthur. And this dog of this had many injuries in his back and in his teeth. So that's why one day they gave him some food, like meatballs. So Arthur ate it, and then they noticed that wherever they went, Arthur followed. So in a short summary, Arthur followed them until they had finished the race and they adopted him. But sadly and unfortunately, the Ecuadorian Agricultural Board did not let them get Arthur back to Sweden. After some conviction from more friends. They had finally went and got Arthur back into home where he enjoyed there. So they enjoyed their life there. And that is all for the summary. So from this book, I noticed that there were many grammatical mistakes here. And it was very hard pronouncing the Swedish countries here, which was called, let me just find it, Örnsköldsvik. See, as you can see here, this is Örnsköldsvik. This is where Mikael was born and lived. So the weaknesses of this book were some grammatical errors and the slow pacing too. Since from chapters 1 to 3, it was all about Mikael and his team. So the strengths of this book, rather, actually, was that it was very interesting from the start until the end, and even mostly in the middle. Since the plot was very, very interesting, and since you couldn't imagine that there was a dog in the jungle who was lost and abused and tortured by his past owner with injuries from his back and teeth. So that's the strengths and weaknesses. So in this book, I want to know if you would like to read this book, because I'm recommending you for this, especially if you are pet lovers of dogs and cats. This will be the book that you want to read. For my rating of this book, I would rate it 8 out of 10, since I like dogs and cats too. And for the characters, I give it a 4 out of 5, since the characters were very interesting and they had served a major purpose for their roles. And for the plot, I give it a 2 out of 3 stars, since the plot was very interesting and they had so many plot twists here. So I would recommend you this book, especially if you love pets. Thank you for watching this video of mine of reviewing this book, and I hope that one day you will read this book and you will see how it affected your life. Thank you and goodbye.